All right, so we have everyone, so let's get started. Welcome to the 4C Risk webinar on Cognitive GRC. We will spend the next 1 hour learning about the role of AI in making GRC more efficient, effective, and agile. A few housekeeping items before we start the session. This session is being recorded and all participants will have access to the webinar recording. It will be posted on the 4C Risk website for viewing. We will also be sending a summary transcript of the webinar in the next few days. If you have questions during the session, please post them in the chat window. We will respond back to you through email if time does not permit in the meeting today. Now, without much further ado, I have the privilege of introducing our distinguished panel. Jessica McDermott is the Principal Director within Accenture's Risk and Compliance function. She has over 20 years of experience in financial services and demonstrated success in driving transformational change. She has extensive experience in resolving regulatory actions, reshaping risk and control environments, delivering enterprise-wide policy and technology change, and increasing operational efficiency. Her areas of expertise include enhancing controls of financial products and activities through business risk and regulatory program management. Welcome to the panel, Jessica.
Thank you, Becky.
The next guest does not really need much introduction. Michael Rasmussen is an internationally recognized pundit on governance, risk management, and compliance. With 28 plus years of experience, Michael helps organizations improve GRC processes and choose technologies that are effective, efficient, and agile. He is a sought-after keynote speaker, author, and advisor, and is noted as the father of GRC, being the first to define and model the GRC market in 2002 while at Forrester. Prior to founding GRC 2020 Research, Michael was a vice president and top analyst at Forrester Research, Inc. Before Forrester, he led the risk compliance consulting practice at professional services firm and has specific experience managing compliance and risk within organizations. Welcome to the panel, Michael.
It is a pleasure to be here.
My name is Venki Yarapothu. I'm the founder and CEO of 4C Risk. We are a venture capital-backed startup based out of Silicon Valley, California. Prior to starting 4C Risk, I spent well over 15 years developing GRC software, and more importantly, had the opportunity to onboard hundreds of customers onto the GRC platforms. One of the key takeaways for me was that a lot of GRC work is still done offline, especially true when working with unstructured text. The vision of 4C Risk is to reduce the burden of discovery and analysis of unstructured text on the risk and compliance professionals. 4C Risk has built the first neural network platform to handle the scale and complexity of GRC requirement. The first search engine to access a comprehensive repository of regs, laws, standards, enforcements, and the firm's enterprise taxonomy, all interconnected and providing actionable intelligence. We also bring to the market the first automated compliance map solution that gives firms the ability to create end-to-end traceability of their regulatory obligations to their enterprise taxonomy. Firms can assess the design and operational effectiveness of their internal control framework with compliance maps. Our impact assessment solution is groundbreaking in that it enables firms to automate the assessment of impact of changes on their regulatory, external, and business environments on their enterprise taxonomy. So the first question is for Michael. Michael, you have been referred to as father of GRC, having coined the term back in 2002, and had front row seats to the evolution of GRC. Well, it's almost 20 years since the term GRC was coined, and doing GRC is still not easy. Enterprises are investing, billions of dollars and 10 to 15% of their workforce towards GRC related activities. So Michael, what is Can you give us your State of the Union address on the health of GRC as we stand today?
Wow. Well, for one thing, from my perspective, every organization's doing GRC, whether they call it GRC or something else. The acronym itself doesn't matter. You can be calling it ERM, ORM, Gartner's IRM. When it comes down to it, every organization has some approach to governance, risk management, and compliance. And so it's more of a question of maturity. I don't really want to debate acronyms, but more specifically, how can you improve? How can you make your governance, risk management, and compliance processes more efficient, more effective, and more agile to the needs of a dynamic business that needs to be more resilient? So every business does GRC today. The question is much more one of maturity. So it's not, should we do GRC or not? It's more, GRC or whatever acronym you have, or maybe you don't even have an acronym. Call it ABC or XYZ. What are you doing today, and how can it be done better? How can you improve upon it? So in that context, GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, are actions and behaviors of the organization. It's not necessarily technology. There's technology to improve GRC. And I think that you can't make GRC efficient, effective, and agile without technology. But GRC is much, much more than just technology. But there is technology for GRC. But one of the things that frustrates me all the time is when I get asked in those questions, it's like, we just bought GRC, now come and tell us how to do GRC. That's really backwards. Let's put the cart before the horse. You're doing something today. Well, what's your current state? What's that future state you're driving towards? What's the roadmap to get there? And what's the business case that allow technology to help you change and achieve what those goals are? So when the question's asked, how effective is GRC today? I mean, every organization is doing GRC. Some are doing it effectively, some are ineffectively. They might call it GRC, they may call it something else. But the question is where are you at today? And then where do you want to be tomorrow? And how are you going to get there? In general, I see that a lot of organizations are still very fragmented. If you think of my 5-stage maturity model for GRC, you have the ad hoc, the fragmented, the defined, the integrated, and the agile. And so most organizations are stuck on that fragmented and defined stage where there's a lot of different departments doing different things. Some have moved to that integrated stage where they're starting to cross different departments to be able to see a broader perspective of GRC, but that agile stage, level 5 of maturity, I've had organizations say we're a 4.5, we're halfway there, but nobody's fully delivered on the agile stage where it's really integrated in context of performance and being able to navigate the organization and make it much more agile in the waters of dynamic change that we're surrounded by right now.
All right. Thank you, Michael, for that. Jessica, you have been in the trenches, first as a practitioner and now providing strategic guidance to firms, right? Obviously, there are a lot of use cases where AI or cognitive technologies can be applied to GRC. Can you abstract, based on your experience, the underlying principles to successfully leverage AI for GRC use cases?
That's a good question, Venki. And I think what I would advise firms looking to use cognitive technologies alongside their GRC is to be thinking about how do they currently conduct the analysis around the effectiveness of their controls, policies, breadth and depth of the mapping that they have to their regulations. I had a client recently say, I wish I could better understand where my gaps are against all the regulations that we need to comply with vis-a-vis the policies that are mapped to them. What is interesting about cognitive technologies is that allows you to take the data of your regulations library and look at the policies that you have in place and really identify where there might be gaps within your policies or redundancies. And in either case, both of those will create greater efficiencies. The other use case I would mention would be around controls. And so making sure that as you have, if you're mapping regulatory obligations to your controls, you are also going to be looking for, do I have complete coverage of all my obligations to controls? Do I have any redundancies here? And all of that can help you drive a more efficient and agile GRC program.
All right. Thank you, Jessica, for that. So Michael, help us make a business case for cognitive GRC.
Well, I worked around all this, and I think that's one of the things we need to point out is the history and evolution of GRC technology. This webinar is titled GRC 5.0, which follows my model, where GRC 5.0 is cognitive GRC. And so GRC 1.0 is that period that after I first defined it in February 2002 at Forrester, it got hijacked. And so I call it, the Sarbanes-Oxley captivity of GRC. And in which those first 5 years from 2002 to about 2007, it was really about internal controls over financial reporting and not the broader enterprise and operational risk aligned with performance and objectives of the organization. From there, we had GRC 2.0, which was, enterprise GRC. And that was really about starting to link the back office functions and getting enterprise and operational risk to work with corporate compliance and IT security and legal and other functions. But it was really about that second and third line. And then we moved to GRC 3.0 in that period about 2012 to 2017. And I called that GRC architecture, that there wasn't one platform that does everything. There could be a core platform to monitor and manage GRC related risks, but it really required an integration and architecture of different technologies, because there's a lot of best of breed systems out there, as well as content sources and things. And how do we leverage that? And so is GRC architecture. Then we moved into GRC 4.0 from that period about 2018 to the present day, which was agile GRC. And was largely about engaging the front office, not just the back office, the first line. And how do we enable the second and third line to really integrate and make the first line, the front office, more a part of governance, risk, and compliance, and take more accountability and ownership. And then the focus is a lot on modern user interfaces, lower cost of ownership of technology, and things like that. And now we're moving to GRC 5.0. And GRC 4.0 is still very relevant, but GRC 5.0 is about that additional layer of technology, what I call cognitive GRC, the role of artificial intelligence, natural language processing, neural networks, machine learning, predictive analytics, and so much more. And we need to be able to leverage that type of technology to make GRC 4.0 even more effective, efficient, and agile. So that's where I define the business case for cognitive GRC, GRC 5.0, is it should be modeled around 3 areas. And I work with organizations all this time in helping them with business cases. But how is it going to make me more efficient? Time saved, money saved. How is it going to make me more effective, more accurate, complete, thorough, less things slipping through cracks? And then how is it going to keep you more agile and keeping up with business change, regulatory change, risk change, and therefore not only agile, but also resilient too. So when you look at that efficiency message, when you talk about cognitive GRC technologies, let's leverage the area of regulatory change management as one example use case for cognitive GRC. Mm-hmm. Efficiency, I mean, you look at the FCA rulebook in the United Kingdom, the Financial Conduct Authority. I'm told if you print it off, it comes to a stack of paper 6 feet tall. If you look at the US Code of Federal Regulations, US CFR, and you print it off and you stack it end to end, it comes, the document trail is over 26 miles. It's the same length as a marathon.
Yeah.
Now, if as a human, if I'm reading all those regulations, it would take me more than a year, maybe years to read that much material. But a machine could literally read it in minutes, but not only read it, categorize and map it as well. Machines are much, much more efficient at reading regulations and reading documents and mapping it, particularly large volumes. But it's also effective. I was talking to a chief ethics and compliance officer at a life sciences pharmaceutical company in the United Kingdom. They were doing a benchmark in understanding the leverage of things like natural language processing and cognitive GRC technologies for regulatory change. And yes, they found that it was a gazillion times faster, like I just referenced, the efficiency message. But in their benchmarks and studies, they found it was 30% more effective, more accurate, complete. I mean, think about it. If you're given a stack of paper 26 miles long to read or 6 feet tall stacked on top of each other, your mind's going to wander and think, are the Milwaukee Bucks going to win the game tomorrow night? Or what are we doing for dinner? Are those people coming over? What are our plans this Christmas? Our minds slip and start thinking about other things. A machine stays on task. It's 30% more effective in categorized mapping, finding relationships of regulations to policies, controls, risks than humans are, because it doesn't wander. Its mind doesn't wander. And of course, cognitive GRC is much more agile to keep up with all the volume of regulatory change. Global financial services firms, for example, to use Thomson Reuters figures, are dealing with 257 regulatory change events every business day, coming from 1,217 regulators around the world. 257 regulatory change events. How do you go through all that and monitor it and say which ones matter, which ones impact policies or controls of the organization, what needs to be modified and addressed? Cognitive GRC technologies are much more agile, therefore also making the organization more resilient. So a business case for cognitive GRC technologies is you're going to find that you're going to build it in those 3 areas of efficiency, effectiveness, and agility. And there's a strong business case across all 3. I've seen it time and time again.
Now that's so on the mark, Michael. And if I may add, it's also the interconnected nature of the regulatory, business, and the external risk environment. One change in any of this environment has a cascading and uneven impact. So it's not just the reg environment, it's the business environment that's evolving. And then you have your external risk environment that is constantly, evolving, and you have to be on top of it. So thanks for that, Michael. So Jessica, follow up. So obviously, there is a lot of hype and there's a lot of promise for cognitive technologies. So what advice will you give to an enterprise thinking about cognitive technologies, and how to, what are the pros, what are the cons, what do they need to watch out for?
We've seen that time and time again, talking with our clients around what are the challenges with adopting artificial intelligence into their processes. And one of the things that we've heard is that early adopters may have had a challenging experience in that it took a long time to train models. What we are seeing now is technologies like 4C Risk, because they're using that deep learning, and I know you're going to talk about the multifaceted aspects of this technology, but a technology like this can really shorten that time frame. So that return on investment is faster. I had a client recently, I said, we were having this discussion around controls mapping to regulations for the regulatory change process. And I said, well, I'd almost rather just do it myself in Excel because it just will take us so long to get this AI up and running. And I thought, wow, that's amazing, because as Michael just pointed out, the machine is going to be so much more efficient at identifying categories. So I wanted to understand why she felt that way. And my understanding was not all AIs are created equal. So one of the things I would say to firms is, do the proof of concept, understand your data, understand the problem that you're trying to solve with this AI. It might, even if it gets you 70 or 80% of the way there, right? And that can actually happen today very quickly, as we've talked around some of the solutions we've done for clients. And then you use that other 30% for value add. Now you've been equipped with processing as much as you can, up to 70, 80%, and then you're focused on the value add. You're focused on, you've eliminated some of that remedial work, and now you can really look into where are your gaps, and you're focused on those elements that you need to be addressing for your firm to address risk and compliance items. So that's what I would recommend for firms in terms of how to, adopt AI and to be thinking about the problems that they want to solve with that.
I think those are very, very valid points that you raised, Jessica. And I'm going to present a few slides later on in the session talking about the differences in the technology and how the technology has evolved and why, the precision of these technologies, when it comes to doing certain semantic matching has improved over the last 3-4 years and continues to evolve and improve at a significant scale. Michael, I have an interesting question from one of the participants. I want to bring this up in the context of what you talked about previously. Do you foresee a stage 6.0 for GRC, where the GRC is integrated with regulators, without needing an intermediate translation step?
I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a GRC 6.0, but I don't think you're going to eliminate the need for artificial intelligence within the organization. I mean, what needs to happen with the regulators is they need to have a standard publishing format. And I'm saying this, I've been saying this for, nearly 15 years, but, there needs to be like an XML schema and things for publishing regulatory information. So there's a standardized approach globally, or even just within a country be nice. I know the FCA is doing a lot to digitize its rule book, and the United Kingdom's leading some of this area. But it's not consistent across all the UK, and it's not consistent certainly in the US. All the regulators are all over the map. You have different federal regulators, you have different US state regulators. It's a mess. So we need a standard reporting schema to make it more effective. But the role of artificial intelligence to read this and to apply it to the organization context cannot be done by the regulators, because it's your business structure, it's your processes, it's your risk taxonomy, it's your policies, it's your controls. The regulators don't have all that type of information. Every business is unique. I mean, even if you take global banks, I mean, the structure and of policies, the structure of controls and risks at HSBC is different from at Barclays, different from Citibank or Bank of America. Every organization has a different structure internally. And if you're going to map regulations and understand their impact on policies, risks, and controls, you're going to need GRC 5.0 cognitive technologies in your business. The regulator is not going to have that type of understanding of your business, and every business is different. And so these technologies are going to be needed for the foreseeable future.
All right. That makes a lot of sense, Michael. Jessica, for enterprises, that have already made significant investments in their GRC infrastructure, right, which is probably, a significant number of them. How do you position cognitive GRC? Is it a function on top of the GRC infrastructure? How is this all going to work?
That's a good question. And I think Michael had alluded to this earlier, which is it's around breaking down those silos. And one of the things that an AI can do is help you really analyze that unstructured data. So for example, taking your policies. So let's say you have a policy library in your GRC, but you want to know if a particular policy covers the regulation completely, or is it missing any of those regulatory obligations? I want to be able to take a regulation, parse it into its obligations, and then take my policy, parse it into its provisions, and understand if I have any gaps. I want to understand if I have any redundancies there. So it allows them to really analyze what they have. And so I like to think of cognitive GRC as, the smart add-on. So you have this infrastructure, you have this framework in place. As Michael said, people are doing GRC, they've been doing GRC. It's just around the maturity level. Adding a cognitive element to that will take you up that maturity scale. It will allow and really equip you with the analytics and the information you need to drive better business decisions. Will it replace people? No, I think it's really around the value add components of it and making it more efficient. But at the end of the day, it is your business, and you need to be able to drive that framework, tailor it for your business, and understand the risks this pose and the controls and the policies that you have in place to govern that.
All right. Thank you for that, Jessica. And Michael, follow up. And I'll have Jessica also chime in on this one. Should GRC professionals be concerned about job security with the increasing adoption of cognitive technologies by enterprises?
From my point of view, no, because there's such demand for applying this to the business context and to be able to go and be more effective at managing risk. And time again, I'm seeing that organizations are stretched. They don't have enough resources, and they need to be able to get more done with the resources they have. That's where artificial intelligence can leverage and enable those resources to be more efficient, effective, and agile. You know, I was talking to one bank, a mid-sized bank, on their RFP, and they found that 80% of their staff time is just trying to manage documents, not really manage risk and compliance. These people are so buried with just trying to manage documents and emails that it just consumes their time, that they're not effectively managing risk and compliance. You bring in artificial intelligence technologies to take away some of the grunt work, that labor-intensive work, so people can be more insightful and intelligent in helping navigate the organization to manage risk and compliance.
Thank you for that. And this is for both Jessica and Michael. You know, do you have any advice for, you know, GRC professionals with respect to how they can upskill themselves or get more involved with this, you know, cognitive era that we are past entering?
I mean, I think that that's an excellent question, because many compliance officers that I've spoken with have felt this need to understand more about these technologies and to learn about how they can be use them effectively within their programs. I think firms like Accenture can help understand where AI could help you in your process, but it's really around analyzing the end-to-end process, whether within that the GRC framework that you have at your firm, and understanding, okay, well, where do we have a lot of manual work? And, you know, we don't want our business risk professionals spending their nights mapping in a spreadsheet the control to their regulations. Their time is better spent taking better business decisions and managing that risk with their businesses. And so helping them automate some of that work, providing them with analytics that will focus them on where their weaknesses and gaps are so that they can ensure full compliance, I think adds a lot of value. And I think for firms, this is where they need to be looking. Where does my team spend time that they don't need to be spending? And where's their time better spent to help us manage these risk and compliance challenges that we have?
All right. Michael, anything you want to add to that?
No, I would completely echo that. That's great.
All right. So there is an interesting question, Michael, Manisha has posted. So all the technology providers are in a race to bring new GRC platform, which makes organizations confused on how to select one of them. Do you have some key pointers for small and big organizations on what to look for and when to look for the right platform?
First off, again, it starts with understanding your current state, where you're at today, what's being used, and then what's your future state, where you want to be in 2 or 3 years from now. And then what's the technology platform that's not only going to get you 6 months into that journey, but deliver to the end. And a lot of times it's also going to be a technology architecture, because there can be a core platform that does a lot of the overall enterprise risk reporting, but it might need to integrate with like artificial intelligence and cognitive technologies and things for regulatory change and other pieces. So it is a GRC architecture. The business case is built around that efficiency, effectiveness, and agility. But one of the key things I look at is, you know, how modern is the technology? Because I mean, we have some GRC technology platforms that have like 20-year-old code bases under the hood. They put up a pretty user experience and interface, but under the hood, it's still very dated technology and has a higher cost of ownership to configure, maintain, and build out and manage in the organization. And so you want to really look at cost of ownership. And not just the cost to implement, but also the cost to manage and maintain. You want to make sure that you don't buy a solution where you're stuck on upgrades because things have been so configured and customized that you can't get to the next version of the product. And then I really talk to client references and I ask them hard questions. You have to understand that the client reference usually is the decision maker that bought the product. So they have great things to say. They're speaking on the webinars or speaking at the company's conferences and things. And they usually don't want to say anything negative about the product. They're the client reference and they're being paraded all over the place. I ask them hard questions. It's like, where's the product failed for you? Where's it not delivering? They tend to not like those questions. They don't answer them. Then I ask them the same question, but in a different way. I say, on the next version of the product, what would you like to see them add to it? Oh, and they start rattling things off at that point. What they're really telling me is what it's not doing today.
Yeah.
But then when I'm done with those calls, I say, can I talk? This has been great, very valuable for me. I appreciate your insight, but can I also talk to somebody on your team that's using the product down in the weeds day in and day out? Sometimes when I talk to those people, I get a completely different story than I do from the decision maker.
Yeah, fair enough. And Jessica, anything you want to add to what Michael just informed us?
I mean, I fully agree with Michael on this point, and the only thing I would add is, going further into speaking to the people down in the weeds, so to speak. We recently were working with a client, and I was getting a demo from someone who was using the tool, their GRC tool, regularly, and when I'm asking questions like, why do you do that step first versus second? And it was because, well, we don't have the data yet because it takes a long time to get that data. But if we had it, it would like knock out 5 steps here. And I was like, that's a wonderful problem to have, because I know how to solve that. And it's like, well, if we can get you that data sooner, then we can cut out all this extra steps in your process. And that is the ultimate business case, because it's going to eliminate a lot of the noise that people have to deal with that's frustrating for them in their jobs. And it will make their use of GRC tools more effective.
All right. Thank you for that, Jessica. I actually want to take the next few minutes to talk about the technology itself. So I prepared a couple of slides and I just want to go over this with you all. So, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, they are the talk of the business communities all over the world. So let's do a quick primer differentiating them. And then I want to dwell into a few use cases for applying neural language models in the context of GRC. So to put it very simply, machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence, and deep learning is a subset of machine learning. See, the concept of artificial intelligence was first introduced back in 1950s. Right? AI is about enabling machines to imitate, intelligent human behavior. Right? AI in its very early days, and at least for the first 30, 40 years, was very rule-based and needed explicit programming. Right? Machine learning really came into being in the early 80s. It is an application of AI that allows machines to learn and improve from experience without explicit programming. Machine learning, however, still needed human intervention, especially to do some feature extraction. Right? And then we have deep learning. Deep learning really became popular around 2015. Right? And that's really due to the cheap computing power that's available in the form of GPUs, and more importantly, the availability of vast amounts of data for training. Right? The concepts of neural network was around for 30, 40 years, but only since 2015, we have seen significant advances, and we have seen the benefits of neural networks that can be actually put into use to solve real world problems. Right? So deep learning is the application of machine learning that allows machines to learn hidden patterns from vast amounts of data by themselves. So let's discuss some practical applications of deep learning technology, especially as applied to GRC use cases. So these use cases are all about raising the efficiency, effectiveness, and agility of the organization. So we at ForceRisk have been working on the application of trained neural networks to solve the information overload problems, which you all must be very familiar. This dominates the GRC market. Right? 4C risk solutions are built on top of a neural networks that have been trained on millions and millions of lines of regulatory corpora. So these language models have been further fine-tuned to perform specific tasks that can be used to automate critical GRC functions. Okay. So the first use case, business application I want to talk about is a search engine. Right? So a search engine that provides access to all your regulatory requirements and enterprise taxonomy using simple Google-like search functions. Now, how are you going to apply this to the GRC? Hey, you can build your rule inventory with the click of a button. Right? And how about stopping the proliferation of controls risks, by enabling all your 3 lines of defense, but more importantly, the first line of defense, to easily identify similar controls and risks that already exist in your taxonomy, right? Or how about, finding out if a new incident or issue has regulatory exposure in minutes rather than days or weeks, right? So that's really, what the neural network platform brings to the table. The second use case is generating enterprise taxonomy, right? Like obligations from similar rules across multiple regulations, or policies, risks, and control statement, the language for it. Right? So you have a baseline to start building on top of, what the neural networks or the cognitive technologies provide. The third one is really fascinating. You can actually automate, because we have now the ability to compare 2 statements and rate the degree of similarity between the statements. So this particular task can be used to automate compliance traceability by connecting your external obligations to your internal control framework. You really can assess the design and the operational effectiveness of the internal control framework in pretty much real time, right? You can identify duplicate controls in your taxonomy or weed out rogue policies in your enterprise. If you have 240, 250 policies across your enterprise, you can actually start mapping the policies together and see, hey, look, how similar are they? Are there elements of the policy that deviate from your corporate mandates, right? Then you have a classification, right? So you can actually parse your regulatory feeds to identify obligations and also automate the impact assessment of these obligations on your enterprise taxonomy. So this is what, automating impact assessment is all about. Take a feed, parse it, identify what your obligations are, really assess the applicability of it, and then see what is the impact of this across your organization, business units, product lines, locations, and then go to policies, controls, risks, tests. So you can actually create an end-to-end traceability and assess the impact of this. And last but not the least is the clustering, right? Clustering also allows you to identify similar issues, in real time across your organization. So you really don't have to run reports, end of the month to see what the trend is or how the issues are correlated. Or you don't have to really depend on a subjective assessment. You can actually have the machines, the neural networks actually do this mapping, provide you with the intelligence, and then enable you to make decisions much faster. Right? So those are some of the use cases that we wanted to present when it comes to application of cognitive GRC technologies. And there are so many of them. We covered the ones that are very specific to text, unstructured text. But there is predictive analysis, there are ML algorithms, there's so many other things that you could potentially leverage. And as Jessica, Michael have said in before, this is not like a brand new solution. These are bolt-ons that you can plug into your existing GRC infrastructure and get the most out of your infrastructure. So I'll pause and see, Michael, Jessica, if you have anything to add, and then I'm going to go back to the questions that are actually quite a few questions that have come from the participants.
I think, Venki, the only message that I'd like to share with the audience is really don't be afraid of the technology, but embrace where it could take you. Because I think when we talk about really addressing the remedial tasks and being able to focus on the value add, better business decisions driven by analytics and data, there's so much more that firms can be doing and so much more efficiently that I really encourage them not to think that this is nirvana and not really possible. It is possible. The technology is there today, and you know, they can embrace that, and it will really be a game changer for them.
All right. So there's a question, more around technology. How easy is it to integrate with existing systems and database? Right? I'll probably take a first shot at it, and then Michael, maybe you can chime in here. See, the technology and the architectures have evolved, in a way that it is very easy now to integrate through APIs. Right. So any modern architecture has a support for APIs, should have support for APIs. And that's really the key to integrate with existing systems, right? It's all based on REST APIs architecture, and it's a handshake. And there are, standards, there are protocols for authentication. So I would say, it's not hard. It's actually pretty straightforward, as long as the systems do support this kind of architecture. Michael, anything you can add here?
No, I would completely agree with that. That right now, API is the standard way to do this integration, but not all APIs are the same. I mean, it gets to a lot of the architecture of the GRC platforms and how well built out their API interfaces are.
Yep. All right. There is actually another question. This is on third party, Michael, and maybe both Michael and Jessica, you can take this. We've been talking so much about, compliance and working with, mapping enterprise taxonomy to regulations and all that. I mean, third-party integrations and third-party compliance is something, that's coming up very big, and it has been pretty big over the last few years. Do you see applications or any specific use cases you can think of applying cognitive technologies to third-party compliance?
I mean, definitely. There's the ability to monitor, similar to regulatory change, be able to monitor the range of different news feeds and things out there for politically exposed persons, watch lists, sanction lists, negative news, reputation and brand, and security ratings, business and financial ratings, and leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning to be able to analyze those and put those things together and their impact on the organization's extended enterprise.
Another use case for that might be also third-party contracts, and using AI to analyze third-party contracts for certain provisions that you'd like to have in there for either environmental or social or government type clauses. You might also use it for, as Michael was alluding to, for surveillance. Whatever it is in terms of what you want to look at, do I have the right provisions in my third-party contracts? You could leverage this AI to analyze those contracts and help you identify which ones you need to focus on.
All right, thank you.
And on the same thing, I'm seeing natural language processing being used to look at your organization's policies, like code of conduct or IT security policies, and then take in vendor, outsourcer, service provider policies, and then be able to read both and compare them and note the differences, where their IT security policies are different, or where their, labor policies are different. And that becomes critical, particularly in this day of ESG.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's another question here. Typically, organizations have been using GRC systems for a while now. While new technology and change is good, there is always also the resistance to change. How do you see cognitive solution vendors create an all-inclusive solution? Michael or Jessica?
Can you repeat that once more?
Yeah. So really, how do you see, cognitive solutions and, overcome the barriers to change, right? The resistance to change. It's almost like, how would you pitch, a cognitive solution to an enterprise?
But that's exactly what I answered before in building a business case, built around those points of how the cognitive solution makes me more efficient, more effective, and more agile.
Yeah. And Jessica, what are you seeing in the market with respect to adoption of these cognitive technologies?
Well, many clients are very excited about this and wanting to do proof of concept to understand it better, to understand how they would integrate it. Some have concerns around the data that they have in their GRC libraries. Is it sufficient? One of the things that I like about being able to do analysis on unstructured data is that, it doesn't have to be perfect. The idea is can I take these data sets and analyze their relationships? And when you're looking at relationships or correlation, it's not a word for word match, it's really the syntax, and you're looking for the relationship between this versus that, and that I think is very effective. And so I think our clients are very willing to try it, open to it, see the need for it, and are ready to move up in that maturity scale for their overall GRC framework.
Right. So with that, I think there are a lot of questions. Maybe we can take some of this offline, the more to do with technology. But we have about 10 more minutes. So Michael, if I can ask you to do your closing statements followed by Jessica, that will be very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, the value of cognitive technologies is here today, and it's building. So the value is going to even be more stronger in the next 18 months as organizations adopt this, refine it, and implement it, and show even stronger business cases. It doesn't replace GRC 4.0. It adds and extends to GRC 4.0, that agile GRC. And so organizations today should be looking at how do we go about and define a GRC architecture. And this really brings it all together, because you have the GRC 2.0 looking at enterprise GRC of all the different back office functions, to GRC 3.0, the architecture and putting an integration and having the right pieces in place, including best of breed systems, to GRC 4.0 to engage the front office and lower total cost of ownership, to GRC 5.0 to even have a bigger impact on total cost of ownership and be able to make things more efficient, effective, and agile through the use of intelligent technologies.
All right. Thank you, Michael. And Jessica, if you have to kind of summarize.
Accenture recently did a survey of over 200 chief compliance officers around the world. And one of the sort of staggering statistics that came out of that, and we'll be publishing that study in January, but one of the things that really resonated with me was majority of compliance officers believe that costs will increase by 30%, but at the same time are saying that due to cost pressures, they really won't get more budget. And so with that environment of cost pressures, but the need to invest in better programs, I think the main driver for that and what you could achieve is looking for adding cognitive GRC to your GRC program. It will bring the efficiencies. It will make you more agile. It will help you address some of those cost pressures. And I genuinely believe that at this point, the technology is is so advanced that really it can help you get that ROI sooner than what people may have experienced in the past.
All right. Thank you for that, Jessica. So if I have to wrap up, and summarize some of the points that we discussed, most of the points raised by Jessica and Michael are aligned towards the value proposition AI brings to your company's programs, GRC programs. The first thing is efficiency, right? Resulting in time saved, money saved. Secondly, effectiveness, resulting in accuracy, completeness, and thoroughness. And third is the agility, resulting in being able to quickly identify relationships from different perspectives and react to changes in your regulatory, business, and external risk environments. So, thanks everyone. Michael, Jessica, thank you for sharing your time with all of us. And for all the participants, hope this session was beneficial. Tremendous thanks to all of you for joining us today. We will send a link to this session as well as a summary transcript in the upcoming days. And you'll find a lot of reference materials, white papers, and previous webinars that we have done on these topics on our PostgreSQL website. Please feel free to register and download any of these materials. And for some of the questions that were asked and we didn't get a chance to get through, one of us at PostgreSQL will get back to you with some responses. So thank you all again and have a wonderful day.